administrative year. I'm joined by my colleagues Paul Krikorian, Gil Cedillo, and Jose Huizar. We have an action-packed agenda planned for you. And members, if there's no objection, we're going to take items 3, items 6, 7, 8, 9 on consent. 3. Okay, we're going to take items 6, 7, 8, 9 on consent. 6, 7, 8, 9. That's great. On consent. No objections. That will be the order. We're going to move the agenda items slightly out of order. We're going to take item 4 first. Mr. Clerk, would you please call that item?
The CLA and the CAO relative to the Los Angeles Convention Center design competition.
Okay, gentlemen, gentlelady, et al., representing the team. Why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us where we are.
John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst.
Gary Moore, City Engineer.
Natalie Brill, Chief of Debt Management with the Office of the City Administrative Officer.
Bud Overman with the Convention Center.
So, members, before you are a report from the CLA-CAO concerning the selection of an architectural firm, a recommendation for selection of an architectural firm for the Los Angeles Convention Center expansion and renovation project. And attached to that is the actual report from the Bureau of Engineering concerning the selection process, and there's lots of detail about that process. This has been a 2.5 year process leading up to this, whereby the council had instructed the CLA-CAO to commission a study for scoping such an expansion project that was prepared by Convention Sports and Leisure. The council also instructed us to request the Urban Land Institute to do a technical panel to evaluate the convention center. Those reports led to a bid process that the Bureau of Engineering led with the support of the convention center and the CAO-CLA. During that process, there were a number of public hearings and public meetings to obtain input on the design scope, and that led to the selection of 3 architects and a design competition. At the end of the competition on May 18th, the designs were submitted, the models were submitted. Those models were available for public comment and review at the convention center, and there was a meeting on, I believe it was June 2nd, where over 200 people showed up, and the architects presented their plans and their concepts for the convention center. All of that led to the final review and consideration by the scoring team and a recommendation to select HMC Populous as the architect for this project. Before you is a recommendation concerning that selection, as well as a recommendation to direct staff to do additional follow-up work, such as preparing a financing plan and other research and work necessary to advance this project to the next step.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
We just want to really thank the committee and the City Council and the Mayor for this opportunity. And it's working closely with our Chief Deputy City Engineer, Deborah Weintraub, and Bud's Assistant General Manager, Tom Fields, and our staffs. We've really, it's been an enjoyable experience, and we had 3 really good firms, and but we're very much supportive of our recommendation of the HMC architects with Populous, and be glad to answer any specific questions about the process.
Well, why don't you outline for us scoring criteria and how the team arrived at its recommendations?
Sure. What we did is we actually had 6 different criteria which we scored on, and we subsequently divided that up into finer, so we had 15 areas that we were scoring. And what we did is we had developed that the scoring criteria prior to receiving any of the proposals. One of the areas that we scored on, and I'll give you a couple of examples, was the civic presence of the design. Another area was the site phasing analysis of the existing elements and consideration for future improvements. Another area was the ability to deliver the design within the available construction budget. Sustainability is really key, as we all know right now, and that was another important design feature that we looked at. This building is slated to be a LEED Gold building. And then one last category was the quality of the interior space and the flexibility to meet the current and future programs. And so we scored around those 6 criteria.
Okay. We had a chance to meet the Populous team. Why don't you, can we have the team come up to the table?
Yeah, why don't we have
Yeah.
Michael and Pascal come on up.
We know this is an important project for the city, for the region. This is an exciting phase. We are not at the point of agreeing to a specific plan. We know that's still to be negotiated and discussed. But whatever plan is adopted, this is going to be a tremendous economic development engine, both during pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction. And we are certainly concerned with many elements as this project moves forward, not the least of which is the level of diversity that's reflected on the team and on contractors and subs that are going to be a part of this project. And while we have Populous at the table, we'd certainly like to get some better appreciation for your commitment to diversity, what plans you will consider taking, and how that element is going to be a part of your development process here.
Chairman Price, esteemed members of the committee, we will, on behalf of the HMC Populous team, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity of visiting with you today. If I can take just a brief moment to introduce some of the team members who were able to make it today. We have Ms. Annie Chu Gooding Architects, Interior Architecture and Public Art. Mr. Bobby Knox Architects, Accessibility Oversight. Mr. David Maestras, The Olden Studio, Landscape. Mr. Eric Carboneer, Sustainability. To my left, Mr. Michael Lockwood, Lead Architect Design from Populous. And I'm Pascual Gutierrez, Managing Principal of HMC Los Angeles. We have 22 partners that participated in this project with 48% representation, diversified over small business enterprise, minority business enterprise, women business enterprise, emerging business enterprise, and disabled veteran business enterprise. Our project is a composition of art and architecture that creates a visitor experience. An experience that's never more than one step away from daylight and expresses the diversity and the authenticity of the city of Los Angeles. It is inspired by the words of a Los Angeles legend who once said, "Good skaters skate to the puck, but great players skate to where the puck is going to be." This is a global, local placemaking at the heart of a connected neighborhood. It's east side, west side, north to the mountains and south to the sea, and everything in between. For some, it is Nuestra Señora, La Reina de Los Angeles. For others, it is downtown. And for everyone, it is the open invitation of welcome to LA.
Care to add to that?
That's tough to follow. I'm Michael Lockwood with the Populous, and I appreciate the chance to be here. This design process is very difficult to sum up, and it's been a months-long process. But as Pascual mentioned, it's about placemaking, functionality, and authenticity. We want to create a place that's both global and local. We want to invite the world to Los Angeles. This is a world capital. We think the convention center can be a great place for the world to meet. But at the same time, we want it to be a great place for local residents to meet. So our design balanced the experience of a global convention center with the needs of a local community. And we think we did that very well. With the functionality component of it, it has to be a world-class convention center. It has to work well every day for it to be economically viable. And from an authenticity point of view, we really leaned heavily on Annie Chu from a local design sensitivity point of view for our coloration, the design pattern, the language, really integrating the spirit of Los Angeles into the building so that when guests come to the building, they leave knowing they were in LA. It's a memorable experience, so it's going to be a fantastic experience, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to be part of the team.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Well, Mr. Moore, just review for us again the next steps after our actions today, what the subsequent steps are going to be in this process of...
Absolutely. I think what's key here is the CAO is reporting back in 120 days on the financing plans for the expansion and the renovation. The Chief Legislative Analyst, along with CAO and the Bureau of Engineering and the Department of Convention and Tourism Development, to prepare a report on the expansion and renovation of LACC. And then finally, during that time, we'll be negotiating with the HMC Populous team. So the goal is to come back in 120 days with the financing plan that the CAO, CLA are definitely taking the lead on. We'll be supporting them on.
Okay. One last question. The three architects were asked to incorporate sustainability features into their plans. Can you discuss the concepts provided? Were the proposals included within the budget for this project? How did that play out?
Michael, I guess I'll let you, since I could do it, but
I'll take that. I'm not the expert in sustainability, but it's an absolute priority. Eric Carbonieri is here with our team. He is our sustainability expert, but sustainability is a huge priority for us. We know it's a selling feature for your city and for your facility. Every chance that we have, we will incorporate sustainable features. As Gary mentioned earlier, this will be a LEED Gold facility, so it's above the standards. We'll look at water usage. We'll look at opportunities for photovoltaic incorporation. We'll look at plantings, carbon reduction opportunities with the landscaping. There's a lot of things that are wrapped into that, but it's at the forefront of our design solution, absolutely.
Councilmember, I would add in that we're getting a jump on this and working with Bud and his team this year on installation of photovoltaics on the existing convention center that will not interfere or have to be modified with this expansion. So we're excited to work with Bud this year and get a jump on increasing the sustainability of the convention center.
Well, that sustainability is an important factor, an important component, I think, and a big selling feature for a state-of-the-art center. Members, with no objection, I'm going to move that we approve the recommendation and with these amendments to instruct the BOE with the Bureau of Sanitation, the Department of Water and Power, the CLA, and CAO to evaluate the sustainability proposals presented in the LA Convention Center Design Competition and report on those program elements that will be most effective in maximizing the Convention Center sustainability range, the Convention Center sustainability in energy, water, recycling, and related resources. And further, to instruct the CLA and CAO to investigate sources of federal, state, and local funding resources to implement these sustainability features, including state cap-and-trade funds and others. Okay. We've got a second, and no further objection or discussion. That will be the order. And thank you for the presentation, and we look forward to a contract that we can all be proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we are moving to item 5. Mr. Clerk, please read the item.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. On item number 4, we do have a speaker card.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let's hear the speaker.
4.
Do I have the card? Yes, not yet. Mr. Spindler, please take the mic. Mike, you have 1 minute, sir.
The convention center, tear it down. Take it down. It cost us a football team. You don't have much land over there. You got the Microsoft Center, it used to be called LA Live, across the street. All these new fancy-dancy hotels, but you can't squeeze a football stadium or a downtown baseball stadium in there. Tear it down. Get rid of it. Then put in a multi-purpose stadium. You can put the Dodgers in there in a covered stadium or a football team. That's what you should have done. You're trying to put something next to the convention center. You squeeze the life out of the potential. That's why you lost. That convention center is a white elephant. Tear it down. It's a bad design. Stop sucking tax dollars into this loser.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, Mr. Clerk, are we ready for item 5?
Item number 5 is a joint report from the Workforce Investment Board and Economic and Workforce Development Department and City Administrative Officer to report relative to approval of the City of Los Angeles Workforce Development Board Year 16 Annual Plan from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016.
Okay, the 16th annual plan. What do we have in store?
Good afternoon. My name is Shafia Amir from the CAO's office. Before you is a report from our office regarding the city's Year 16 Workforce Development Board Annual Plan to be effective from July 2015 through June 2016. I'll give you a brief summary of the plan with some highlights and changes, and then we can take your questions. We also have the department here, EWDD, to answer any questions you may have. First, I wanted to note that the original transmittal from EWDD regarding the annual plan is dated June 5th, 2015, and a second EWDD transmittal was released on June 16th, which made some amendments to the original annual plan as it was released. The changes involved replacement of one of the WorkSource Center contractors. There was no funding change, and the changes are incorporated into the CAO report and recommendations. There were also 4 technical corrections we had to make to 4 different recommendations in the CAO report, and those changes have been given to the city clerk. The Year 16 annual plan is comprised of approximately $64 million to fund the Economic and Workforce Development Department's workforce development strategies and activities. The funding sources consist primarily of the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act formula and competitive grants, Los Angeles County grants, various special funds and competitive grants, and the City General Fund. The Los Angeles Workforce Investment Board, or WIB, approved the Year 16 annual plan on May 27th, following the required 30-day public comment period. The $64 million reflects a 4% decrease from the revised Year 15 current year plan, which was $66.5 million. The department anticipates some additional funding which is not included in the proposed Year 16 plan in the form of 2 competitive workforce grants which were recently awarded for a total increase in the amount of $1.4 million.
Where were those locations?
I'm sorry?
Where were those locations? The 2? You said we 2 added?
2 additional grants that were awarded. They were actually, you can just go ahead.
We just recently received a state award to do sector initiatives, and that it's going to be an amount of $1.2 million. That one is going to be citywide, and it will be focused on industry-specific career development, and we will involve all 16 centers. Then our second grant was a disability grant that's going to focus on our disability population, which is the focus of the new WIOA legislation.
Those grants will be considered, this is Greg Irish, Workforce Investment Board, those grants will be considered by the WIB tomorrow in terms of acceptance and then forwarded to you for your concurrence.
Thank you.
Okay.
Continue.
Sure. The rapid response allocation, which is one of the formula allocations in the Year 16 annual plan, is just a placeholder amount, which is the current year amount. That's because the actual amount for Year 16 had not been released by the federal government at the time of, or had not been released at the time the annual plan was prepared. EWDD doesn't intend to report back to the Workforce Development Board, Council, and Mayor regarding any changes to the annual plan, including revisions and these additional grants, which Robert mentioned. Regarding changes to the Year 16 plan, the biggest change is that there is a new federal legislation that's going to be in effect. The current legislative act is known as the Workforce Investment Act, and effective July 1st, and that's known as WIA, effective July 1st, the new legislation will be known as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. It'll replace the previous legislation, which is WIA. There are some changes and new requirements anticipated due to the new legislation, but EWDD is already positioned to align themselves with the new priorities and objectives. New strategies and emphases include using technology for better integrated services, targeting services to the most vulnerable populations, and expansion of eligibility criteria for youth workforce services. The federal government is expected to release new regulations for WIOA in January 2016. Year 16 highlights in adult workforce include continued implementation of the integrated service delivery model through the 17 contracted workforce centers, expansion of services for individuals seeking self-employment opportunities, and the continuing Los Angeles Regional Initiative for Social Enterprise Grant, which targets job seekers with a history of homelessness and/or incarceration, as well as disconnected youth. On the youth workforce side, WIOA, the new legislation emphasizes services and goals in financial literacy and the expansion of eligible ages up to 24 years of age. The Summer Youth Employment Program, with funding from various sources, including the City General Fund, will be implemented with 22 contractors, for which contract authority is included in this report. And as a final note, the recommendations in the CAO report also include an instruction for the Chief Legislative Analyst to work with the Workforce Development Board, the City Attorney, the Office of the Mayor, and the CAO, as well as EWDD, to renegotiate a new agreement between the Workforce Development Board and the local elected officials, i.e. Council and Mayor, once the new regulations are promulgated by the federal government. This agreement is required under the federal legislation to coordinate administration of the workforce funding and services. So that's it for my report. If you have questions for myself or the department, we can take that.
Okay. I've just got one question on the workforce centers. I see we have an entry here for LAUSD at the bottom for the $800,000. How is that going to be allocated?
So currently, we have a national model that has LAUSD integrated into our U-Source system. So they have PSA counselors, people service attendance counselors that have access to the academic data of the students. So it saves the student from going to the school to collect their record, then going back to our U-Source system. And also, most of those counselors are master level social workers, so they actually do the identification of the health and human services. So it really becomes a one-stop model, and we pay 50% of the salary for that counselor, and LAUSD provides the other 50%. And there's one in each of our 16 centers.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Mr. Weezer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I just want to thank you for the work you've done on this to really look at data and see where the greatest need is and where our residents are living that would make use of these types of services. I've noticed a direction toward more data-driven decisions in terms of how we service this, and the consolidation that you have done has been working. And I'm particularly satisfied because it proved one of my points that we needed a center in Bow Heights for a very long time through that data analysis. But I just want to commend you, the direction you're going for in terms of using data to determine decisions that we're making, putting our resources where they're most needed. I think we're going to get better outputs and better results from going in that direction that you guys have been moving in the last few years. Thanks.
Thank you. And I would just call to your attention, in your plan, there's an economic landscape, to your point of using data, that ourselves and the county commissioned the LA EDC to do a report on a regional basis. So we're actually looking at our population on a regional standpoint. And it gives you some really interesting statistics about our workforce. Two things that I'll just highlight is that 25% of our city residents, our adult residents, do not have a high school diploma. So when we talk about
repeat that, how many? What's the percentage?
Over 25%. Yeah. So when we talk about economic development, we actually have to talk about education and workforce development, and we have to push our adult population to receiving their high school diploma and then further that with some training. Because the second point is that where the jobs are growing for middle class jobs are going to be needing at least a high school diploma and some college. So that really says to us in terms of points our investments to really pushing that population up the economic ladder by having additional education for our adult population.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to tell you the unemployment rate as of May for the city of LA is 7.8%. For the state, it's 6.4%. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the state and in the country. And it's fitting that you're actually considering the minimum wage at this time. I know they're up after us, but this book is the blueprint for getting people back to work. And quite frankly, we have performance metrics, Councilmember Huizar, that focus on placing people in living wage jobs after they're exposed to the various interventions through our systems. That's our intent. That's what this book does in terms of this plan. It's a living document. We expect that we'll actually add funding to this because every year we try to go after specific grants for specific council districts and specific populations. So we'll be coming back before you as we're successful in filling the gaps that may exist from this plan.
Okay, any other questions? We appreciate the job you're doing. These are two very important areas. The workforce centers and the youth source centers really do provide a foundation and work complementary with our education system. You know, in my district, for example, a third of the population is under 18. And so we have some real significant challenges, and you referenced that 7% unemployment. I bet it's a little bit higher in my area and in other parts of the city. You know, we don't have the luxury of that 7% figure, but it's something that we need to correct. And so if there's no further discussion, we will approve this recommendation as presented, approving the CAO's report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. That
Yes.
would be as amended.
Okay, we'll approve the
by the
report as
CAO.
amended. We'll approve the report as amended. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can we ask that you send this forthwith to the council? We have to have contracts in place and begin service delivery July 1st.
Okay, if there's no objection, we will send it straight to the council.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we have one card. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, where are we? Yes, we have one card on item 5 before we move on. Wayne from Encino. Or Encina.
Like a dying patient, you just keep pumping that money in there, and we keep losing jobs. 7.8% unemployment for the city. 25% of the residents don't even have a GED or a high school diploma. Well, if I was going to applaud failure right there, that would be applause right there, because we are the major economic performers of failure. This city is a failure. $64 million for this? And at the end of the day, how many jobs with that $64 million are actually going to be created and exist longer than 6 months? Nothing. It's just a boondoggle. Just get real with it. Take the $64 million and repair sidewalks with the money.
All right, thank you for your comment. We're going to move on now to item number 1.
Item number 1 is a CLA report relative to compensated and uncompensated time off survey of California cities with minimum wage ordinances.
Okay, I think we're going to take the public comment. We're going to take public comment first on this. We know there's a lot of interest. We're going to limit the discussion, though, to about 10 minutes, so we'll have 5 speakers on each side. This matter will be continued today. We're not going to make a final decision today, but we do value your input. And so let's have up Ruben Gonzalez. Okay. Ruben Gonzalez, Sarah Mitchell, Todd Swartz, Matt Sutton, and Carolyn Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ruben Gonzalez. I'm here on behalf of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. There are obviously a lot of points to make on this issue, and several of the other folks speaking will hit a bunch of them. I'm going to focus on one. The larger issue is, once again, we're coming into a place where our rhetoric doesn't meet reality. What we keep hearing over and over again is about workers being sick and the impacts of a worker who is sick, that you don't want an employee to have to come who's sick, that it's not fair to them. We can agree with all of that, and we can talk about what is appropriate as far as sick leave and managing sick leave. The problem is when you're talking about paid time off, you're talking about creating a financial asset. So the real challenge here is in any PTO measure that you might pass, it's not PTO, it's sick time. And if you pass a sick time law, That doesn't mean that for the hours of sick they have, they get to cash out if they leave that job at some point. If this is really about the health and well-being of the worker, the customer, and the employer, then it's about sick time, not about creating another financial...
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Mitchell. Todd Schwartz has already left, so I'll be speaking for him and on behalf of about a half dozen other restaurant owners that sat here patiently for 2 hours and now have to go back to run their restaurants, and they're unable to provide their own personal input. The national minimum wage was established in 1941, and since then we have had in-depth and ongoing dialogues on a federal and state levels with hundreds of economic reports and analysis. Paid time off for one city in one state, particularly a city surrounded by 30 competitors, is an irresponsible policy to do singularly. PTO is historically a benefit, and the state legislature determined that 3 days of sick leave is a right to Californians. Let our businesses, especially the retailers, the restaurants, and the entertainment industries that rely on shift workers, have the chance to adapt to this huge change from Sacramento. Sometimes the city takes misplaced pride in doing things differently, but there's no pride in forcing our businesses to make cuts in shifts and jobs for employees that they respect. Leave paid time off policies to the state, consider the California law a victory, and let it sit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Hi, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Matt Sutton with the California Restaurant Association. We represent a lot of the community-based restaurants here in the city of Los Angeles. I think the most important part of this dialogue is that the state law takes effect just within days on July 1st, and that'll provide 3 paid sick days, and no employee of any kind is left behind. It applies to part-time, it applies to seasonal, and it applies to full-time workers. In the restaurant industry, I think we're a bit unique. We have the Retail Food Safety Code, which bans sick employees from coming into restaurants, puts the onus on a manager to have them leave, and we have shift trading in order to accommodate the sick leave outside of the mandate. Many people are trading shifts to accommodate their sick needs and ending up at the end of the pay scale with the same number of hours and same pay. So that's a flexibility that we have. And the other issue is, for us, we pay for the sick person that's out, but we also have to have a replacement employee come in and pay for that. And so that's not necessarily true with other industries. But for those reasons, we'd ask you to press pause, let the state law take effect, and let's see how we adjust with that and the minimum wage increase.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, Council. I represent both myself and a 500-plus and growing group of independent restaurants and food trucks. The scope of our group ranges from all sizes, all types of foods, council districts, and ethnicities. Outside of the geographic city core where most of us started, Council members Busciano, Martinez, Blumenfeld, and Fuentes, I've spent much time in your districts recently educating people on the City Council agenda, of which many had no idea. They're with our coalition now. Each one of us invites you to come to our local business and see what we deal with every day. A public-wide open invitation to our representatives. No offense to anyone here, but we are not a paid alliance or chamber. We are a 1,000% grassroots organization. Small business owners are as valuable as the people that work for them and are part of the 99%. We've accepted the new minimum wage. We all urge you to let the state 3-day sick time requirement, which starts July 1st, be implemented first and allow for these heavy financial absorptions to take place before deciding on more financial pressures. We sincerely are just trying to keep our doors open. Thank you.
Okay, 5 additional speakers: Rusty Hicks, Irene Gonzalez, Martha Sanchez, Ruth Dawson, and Rosa Lopez. You will all come forward, please. You have 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Rusty Hicks with the LA County Federation of Labor and the campaign to raise the wage. We have said, our coalition has said from the very beginning that raising the wage, enforcing the wage, and giving workers a pathway to paid sick days, not paid time off, but paid sick days, was an important part of a comprehensive policy. 50% of working mothers in this city do not have sick days. Nearly 1 in 5 have lost a job as a result of not having paid sick days. The state has taken a great step and required 3 days, but frankly, it's insufficient. As we have said, we called upon these 3 pillars of an important platform and a comprehensive policy, and we've done 2 of them. But now we have the opportunity, you have the opportunity to follow San Francisco, Oakland, San Diego, and a number of other cities who have done the right thing and given workers in their city paid sick days. And frankly, it is probably one of the most popular components that you could pass as a part of that platform, with 90% of residents in the city of LA supporting paid sick days.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
much.
for your comments.
Hello, my name is Irene Gonzalez, and I'm a home care worker, a member of the United Long-Term Care Workers, SEIU. Mi nombre es Irene y yo pertenezco al Sindicato de Trabajadores del Cuidado del Hogar, SEIU. I support the LA providing paid sick days with enforcement to its workers. Estoy a favor de Los Ángeles para que nos paguen días de enfermedades a todos los trabajadores. I cannot afford to take an unpaid sick day because when I miss a day of work, I fell behind on paying bills, rent, and I'm putting food on my table. Yo no puedo permitir tomar un día de enfermedad porque realmente ahorita tengo que pagar la renta y tengo que poner comida en la mesa. Low wage workers like myself care for the most vulnerable in LA, and by providing paid sick days for us, we can help the people that we care for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Marta Sanchez. I'm a member of ACE, and I'm a South Central Los Angeles resident, not SOLA, South Central Los Angeles. In behalf of the women working with families and all low-wage workers, I want to encourage you to support a policy that could give the maximum paid sick days in enforcement, because more than half of the working women have no access to sick days, and 1 out of the 5 have lost their jobs because of it. When our kids get sick, it is the mom who takes care of the burden, and we take care of our kids. We take our kids to the doctor. We take care of them when they're at home, and we need more days to let them to recover. 3 days is not enough. It is not reasonable, and we need more human consideration when we are sick as well. We want a comprehensive policy that includes enforcement, and when someone gets sick and go to work can lead to workers' compensation. It's more expensive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ruth Dawson. I'm with the ACLU of Southern California. And first, I want to thank you, as many others have, for passing the historic living wage and wage enforcement ordinance earlier this month. No one working a full-time job should be paid a wage that keeps them in poverty, and you've taken a significant step in the right direction in that way. At the same time, no one working a full-time job should have to choose between paying their rent and staying at home when they or their child is ill. Workers simply need earned paid sick days. Paid sick days uphold both reproductive justice and gender equity, as I've said before, for Los Angeles workers. Further, LGBTQ workers and families are particularly impacted when they do not have earned paid sick days. LGBTQ couples raising children are more likely to be lower income than straight or cisgender couples raising children in California, and thus they have a harder time taking unpaid time off without further jeopardizing their economic situations. The ACLU urges the council to pass a strong paid sick days ordinance, and at the very least 5 to 9 days, as we've seen in other cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need an interpreter?
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rosa López.
Good evening, my name is Rosa Lopez.
Yo soy miembro y líder de Kiwa. Yo trabajé en el restaurante Chininasi.
I'm a member of Kiwa, and I once worked at the restaurant Chai Dynasty.
Por 3 años. Yo preparaba la comida que ordenaban.
I worked there for 3 years. I used to prepare the food that people would order.
En unas ocasiones, que pedí el día por estar enferma, me dijeron que tenía que llegar porque no había nadie que me cubriera mi turno.
There was occasions where I used to ask for days off because I was sick, but I was told that I had to come in regardless because there was nobody to cover my shift.
Por miedo de perder mi trabajo, yo trabajé con gripe y con enfermedad del estómago.
Out of fear of losing my job, I did work with the flu as well as stomach flu.
Los patrones sabían que yo estaba enferma y así todavía.
My employers knew that I was sick, but even with them knowing,
me pusieron a preparar la comida.
They had me cook food.
No es saludable para el trabajador ni para los clientes.
That's not healthy for the worker nor for the customers.
Trabajadores necesitan para los clientes. Para los clientes, trabajadores necesitan no tomar el día si están enfermos, sin miedo de ser despedidos.
Workers should be able to take sick days without the fear of being fired. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Zimmerman. I'm an attorney with Schwartz, Steinspear, Dorman, and Summers. I'm appearing today on behalf of Lane. Lane is very appreciative and supportive of the committee's efforts thus far and the steps they've taken towards enacting sick leave legislation. To that end, Lane has followed the Commission's progress very closely, and in doing so, it reviewed the CLA report that was released last Friday. In its review, Lane noted that there were a couple of pieces of information that were inadvertently omitted from the report, and Lane would like to take this opportunity to clarify the record for the Commission, and has prepared a memorandum, and we ask that each of you review the memorandum that Lane has prepared, as well as this supplemental chart that gives an overview of sick leave legislation in various jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment on this matter. Last month, the City Council passed a historic piece of legislation that raised the wage for thousands, hundreds of thousands of Angelenos. I was honored to be part of that legislation and to have ushered it through this committee. As exciting as it was to see the mayor give his signature to that historic legislation less than 2 weeks ago, the reality is that much work lies ahead for us to define and fine-tune several details of that policy, including paid leave, which we will discuss today. Paid leave has been a part of every City of LA living wage policy since our original legislation was enacted in 1997. Even then, 18 years ago, leaders in the city knew the importance of paid time off. As a former small business owner myself, I understand the concerns being raised by the business community, and I want to assure you that I'm committed to doing the best that I can do to come up with a policy that is good for workers and employees, for workers and employers. In fact, I personally reached out to business leaders to get their feedback on this proposal, and I'm eager to get their responses. But I want to remind the business community that a healthy workforce is a productive workforce. Workers should not fear being fired or not being able to pay rent simply because they need to take time off to care for themselves, a child, or a loved one. And the nation is looking to this city to be a leader on the issue. We should have the courage to be bold and set a high standard that the rest of the country can look to when crafting their own legislation. With that, I'd like to bring up the CLA to present their report on this important topic.
Hello. Good afternoon. John Wickham with the Chief Legislative Analyst again. At one of your previous meetings, you had requested that our office conduct a review of the compensated time off paid leave policies and report back to you with a summary. Our report focuses on the state of California only. We just received a copy of the Lane report, which does look at national cities and states across the country. So there is a little bit of a difference there in the base that we're looking at. We found, we looked at 3 cities that have minimum wage ordinances that have been adopted that include a paid sick leave policy. Those were Emeryville, Oakland, and San Francisco. There are 3 cities that have a minimum wage policy that did not include a paid sick leave, or 4 cities did not include any compensated time off policy of any kind. That was Mountain View, Richmond, San Jose, and Sunnyvale. There are 2 cities that are considering a paid sick leave or compensated time off proposal. That's Berkeley, which will be looking at that later this year, and San Diego. It will be in the ordinance that will be going to the voters. And then we took a quick look at the 3 policies that the City of Los Angeles has passed on different wage policies. So basically it comes down to two models. At Emeryville, Oakland, and San Francisco, they have an annual accrual policy of 1 hour worked, 1 hour of a paid sick leave for 30 hours worked. Part-time employees receive a proportionate allocation of annual sick leave. They have a maximum accrual rate of 72 hours. There's a different accrual rate, maximum accrual rate for small businesses of 48 hours or 40 hours, depending on the city. If hours are unused, when you get to the cap and the hours have been unused, they do not pay out any unused time that's accrued after that. And then only Emeryville has a rollover for the accrued hours. The others were silent on that issue. And then Oakland and San Francisco acknowledge that if a business has a compensated time off model, then that basically meets the obligations of the law for a paid time off policy. So a compensated time off is a broader benefit than paid sick leave, just to be clear. The 3 Los Angeles wage policies that have been adopted by the city, the living wage policy, the LAX hospitality zone, and the hotel worker minimum wage policy, all included a compensated time off model. And that was effectively 12 days a year, and it could be 1 day a month, or is basically how it's accrued. It's part-time accrual is earned by part-time employees. There's a maximum cap of 192 hours. So if you don't use your time, it rolls over until you get to 192 hours. And then after 192 hours, you are then paid for the additional time that you would accrue. In addition, the City of Los Angeles has an uncompensated time off allocation as well of 10 days, and that's provided at a lump sum at the beginning of the year. So those are basically 2 models that we found at the city level. The state has implemented a paid sick leave policy as well. It goes into effect on July 1st. And it's a very complicated model, frankly. And we've had lots of discussions trying to figure out exactly what the intent of the law is and what the effects of that are. Employees accrue 48 hours over the course of the year. But there are ways that employers can designate that only 3 days are usable in the course of the year. So there's some question about whether it's 3 days or the 48 hours. There is no uncompensated time off model or accrual in that policy at all. There is a rollover, but again, because of some of these other issues, it's unclear how the rollover actually works out in the state law. So there are a few models that are available for you. The city policy that you've adopted in the past, the models that are being used up in Northern California, and then the state law that goes into effect in a couple days.
How was the purpose for personal or family illness defined? Frequently, it's the provisions for personal or family illness.
Yes.
Was there any uniformity in how that was defined in the models that we looked at?
Yeah, each of these policies has different language as to whether it's for the individual or if it's also for illness within the family as well. And most of them do include other members of the family as part of a reason for using the time off. The city policy does that as well.
And if employees take consecutive days off, at what point do they need a note from the doctor?
Yeah, I'd have to go back through take a look at that. So there's different levels of proof of your
What's been the experience here?
explanation.
What's been the experience in our city?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer that directly. We might be able to ask John Reamer if he has any experience with that.
Mr. Reamer, do you? As we.
Yes, sir.
Question was about consecutive days off, and at what point do employees, under the current laws here in our city, at what point do employees need to have a note from the physician?
Okay, we're good.
Or do they?
Our ordinance is silent on that. The employer has the latitude of determining how the compensated days will be dispersed to the employee. So we have not had an instance where it has been an enforcement issue. So currently, right now, our ordinance is silent.
Okay. How does the maximum accrual cap work? Are employees capped at a number of hours, or that they can take a year? Or generally, how is that affected here? The accrual cap, maximum accrual cap. Employees capped at the number of hours they can take per year?
So the hotel worker minimum wage policy goes into effect on July 1st of this year, and the cap of 192 hours is a part of that law. So nobody has accrued 192 hours yet. So that'll be one of the things that needs to be worked out as that policy is implemented.
Okay. Members, any other questions this time? Okay, so this is obviously still a work in progress. We're going to instruct the CLA with the assistance of the city attorney to report back on the sick pay leave policy, including circumstances an employee can take paid sick leave, when an employee can begin taking that sick leave, and options for an annual or accrual cap on those benefits. Mr. Cedillo.
Am I on?
Yes.
So the only question is, when we moved the minimum wage, as we all did a few weeks ago, there were studies involved in terms of costs and projections. Are we going to have any studies with respect to that in terms of cost factors on this matter?
Well, presumably that's going to be part of the CLA's report. Can you clarify that? His question specifically was on costs associated.
Yeah, we do not have a fiscal analysis of that pending. If that was the instruction of your committee, then we would follow through on that.
Mr. Corcoran, I'll defer to you.
Well, it sounded like Mr. Cedillo was asking more about an economic analysis than a fiscal analysis, which CLA's office wouldn't have the capacity to be able to do.
No, that would not be in the technical responsibilities that we have available to us. We would have to find a consultant who could do that kind of economic analysis.
Have you had an opportunity to review the legislative history of the state legislation or any of the materials in support of the state legislation to see whether there was any statewide economic analysis done during the extensive many months of legislation on this very issue that happened in the two houses? Was any of that analysis done during the course of the preparation of the state bill?
We did a quick review. We could delve deeper into the analysis that might be available there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I pulled away. Did you say that we could do a review of previous studies Is that what you asked for?
Well, it wasn't what I asked for. It's a good idea, but that could mount up into some substantial cost because we just did a peer review even of our 3 economic analyses on the minimum wage, and there was a substantial cost even in the peer review. But as far as I know, in none of we didn't have any extensive economic analysis in any of those on the impact of potential paid time off or sick leave policy.
Yeah, paid sick leave was not an issue that was presented for our researchers to look at the time we conducted those studies. So we could ask them if there is any research available on the subject matter. They might have some things that they could share with us quickly. But if we wanted to obtain a study on that, that would require some additional time, effort, and money.
Well, perhaps just a literature review and then a report back, perhaps just a review of what the existing literature is. Okay. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, be a good start.
Mrs. Martinez.
Oh, there, Mr. Chair. So, I spent some time with the motion picture industry yesterday, and one of their questions or their concerns was, how does sick pay apply to those whose work takes them in and out of the city? That's not the only industry. I guess the same thing could be said about the trucking industry. How are we tracking that? Do you have any sense of how that's going to work?
Some of the policies have factors to determine what is consecutive employment and whether you can come back and expect to have the time saved for you. And so we can look at that a little bit deeper. That is an issue that people have been studying. I don't know if it's an issue that the BCA currently uses or addresses.
So for the motion picture industry, for example, they could film in Paramount in the city of Los Angeles, and then next week they can be filming a pilot for Sony in the city of Culver City. So that's something that they brought up, and it's a good question. I don't have an answer for them. That's why I brought it up.
In addition, for the film industry, they're working for different production companies, which means they have multiple employers, and so being able to accrue enough time to be able to use it or have it available is a difficult issue. So we would have to take a look a little closer at that industry in particular to see what kinds of
right, especially
rules
at
are
a
in place.
time that you're trying to attract more filming into Los Angeles. I think we need to certainly do that as well. I also wanted to establish some sort of general framework for the policy. And some of the ideas that come to mind is how much compensated time are we talking about? You all may have already thought about this. Should there be uncompensated time off? And if so, how much? Do we apply this to part-timers? Again, if so, how do we calculate that? Should there be a different requirement for small businesses? Can the employer roll over unused time off as well? Will there be a rollover limit? And the last one that we thought about is, are there any limits on how time off can be used by the employee? So these are just sort of general, but again, I think we really need a framework for this policy moving forward.
As an attachment to our report, we have a chart that runs down a number of policy issues that should be considered when drafting a policy
Great.
for paid time off or uncompensated time off if you choose to go in that direction.
Ms. Koretz.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but one follow-up to that. So I just want to be clear that we recognize the difficulty of this particular issue with the film industry. If you could wind up working for 15 different employers, some of them in the city, some of them outside of the city, how do you ever figure out how to apportion sick leave? Let's say you've given 5 days or 7 days or 9 days a year, and you're out for a couple of days. How do you apply that? And is it not going to be more of an administrative nightmare for those entities to all try to track these pieces? It certainly gives me some pause that we're going to actually have great difficulty in the implementation in a couple of these industries.
Most of the policies have a requirement that you work for that employer for a certain number of days or months. before you can begin to use any or accrue any time. And it may be that many of the productions that would that we're talking about would not be in existence long enough for anybody to actually accrue or use sick time. That would be, so that's a unique factor here, that the time of employment with that employer is so short that the policy would never be effective anyway. But there are some other issues, and we can talk to representatives in the film industry and see what their thoughts and concerns are and follow up on that.
And my other concern is the difficulty of employers adjusting to both the minimum wage and the paid sick leave time. So I don't know what the state has done, what other entities have done in terms of just studying this paid sick leave policy. But I think we probably need to look at the combined impact of both, since we're implementing both. So I don't know when the state has looked at these issues, if they've looked at them as separate pieces and not looked at together what happens if they implement one and they also implement a much higher minimum wage, if they've done any of those studies. But it's something we should be giving at least some cursory thought to, because we're certainly asking a lot of our employers, and we should take into account what we think the whole impact will be of all of that.
The state law was passed independent of any minimum wage shift. We know that SB3 is going forward. SB3 is going forward now with consideration. We can check with the legislature to see if they're evaluating SB3 in the context of the implementation of the paid sick leave law. That would probably be most relevant to the question that you're asking.
Yeah, that would be exactly on target to the question.
Okay, members, any other comments? Then we will continue this matter as discussed earlier and instruct the CLA to report back on those issues requested. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Clerk, we're ready for item 2.
Item number 2 is a motion, Cedillo Huizar Bonin, relative to adding an exemption for transitional job programs to the citywide minimum wage ordinance.
Okay, we've got several cards on this. We will again ask you to hold your comments to 1 minute. First up, John Howland, Ruben Gonzalez, Aranda Ruiz, Brittany Morton.
Good afternoon. I'm John Howland with the Central City Association. CCA and the Downtown Center BID are strongly supportive of Councilmember Cedillo's motion. The DC bid and numerous other bids contract with Chrysalis for various services. In addition to helping keep the bid streets clean, we were able to provide an invaluable hand to people who are attempting to overcome many issues associated with homelessness. Many bids have already begun planning for handling operations with fewer Chrysalis employees based on the citywide minimum wage increase. Cuts are being made. Please pass this motion. The services that Chrysalis, Homeboy, the Conservation Corps, and the others provide help save lives. They provide a benefit to the city, to the taxpayers, to bid members, and most importantly, to the transitional employees themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ruben Gonzalez, again with the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. I stand to speak in favor of this action. If this city stands for helping folks get off the streets, if this city stands for helping folks get beyond homelessness, if this city stands for helping at-risk youth, we have no choice but to take this action. It's very surgical, it's very direct, and it's very about keeping within the values that we're all trying to push. So we stand in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariana Ruiz. I'm here on behalf of Homeboy Industries to respectfully ask that you support Motion 4D. At Homeboy Industries, it has never been about the pay. I walked into Homeboy Industries broken and hopeless, but with the desire to take my life back. After 17 years of drug use and criminal lifestyle, I didn't have much to offer my child. Despite all my efforts, nobody would hire me because of my criminal and poor work history. Homeboys provided me with the opportunities to better my life and to better shape my child's future. They helped me to obtain my driver's license, GED, and enroll into college. They provided me with a firm foundation in my recovery, and they have helped me to establish a life beyond my imagination. I set the bar higher and higher as I began to recognize my full potential. The other day, I was honored to watch my dear colleague, who was a heroin addict as of a very young age, walk across the stage and receive his high school diploma, clean and sober. So it's not just about me or about the pay. It's about the next broken individual in need of our services to walk through that door. Please give us this exemption. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last group of speakers, please. Kendra Brown, Juan Alvarez, Jacqueline Ramirez, John Walsh, and Wayne from Encino.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Juan Alvarez, and I've been a core member for a year and a half. Since I've been here, I have become a specialist in my first year. I also learned a lot of job training skills that will benefit me in the future. I came to LA Corps with 0 credits, and now I'm 1 term away from getting my high school diploma. If you do not exempt LA Corps from this minimum wage, other youths like myself will not have the same opportunities that I had. I'm thankful to the Corps for taking a chance on me when nobody else did. When I leave here in 6 months as a graduate, I will be leaving with my head up high with a goal to achieve more than a minimum wage. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jacqueline Ramirez. I'm 22 years old and I'm a single mom of 2 babies. My experience here in the Los Angeles Conservation Corps has been such a blessing to my family and myself. This young adult program helps us young people have a little experience of work, if it's recycling to construction, landscaping, and even to further our education. The course helps us young adults helps us young adults with furthering our education by getting our high school diploma. After our high school diploma, they help us look for the right community college to further our career. The Los Angeles Conservation is a non-profit organization. If minimum wage goes up, our members will start decreasing. I've been in the course for about a year already. I started by going to school for 3 months. Finished, I've been working for 7 months. I've learned to plant trees, make pathways, build gardens for school, and do sidewalks. If minimum wage goes up, our organization will not have enough funds to be able to hire as many young adults as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay Walsh, Confidential. I got my first job after school, minimum wage, 55 years ago. It was $1. $1 then bought more than minimum wage does now. A movie was 15 cents. A hot dog was 15 cents. You could live like a king for $1. And when they raised it to $1.25, and I remember that day clearly, all these jerks, this will be the end of small businesses. The whole world will collapse if we pay people $1.25. They lied, they lied, they lied. Every time we raise the minimum wage, they say the entire economy will fall apart. And every time the minimum wage is raised, the economy improves. 100%. The minimum wage should be $19 an hour. That's what $1 an hour was in 1960. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Yes, exemptions. You don't have exemptions because when you walked into this, you said nobody was exempt. Everybody shares in the same minimum wage. So we hear people saying this new minimum wage will destroy our jobs. You didn't care about the small businesses when they made that argument. Fine. You didn't care when anybody else made that argument. Fine. Everybody gets the same minimum wage. They can pay it. They're making money. Give minimum wage at $15 an hour to every single person without exemption and without delay. Stop carving these Mickey Mouse exceptions. Or withdraw the whole goddamn thing and go back and default to the state minimum, which is $10 an hour in January the 1st. Make up your minds.
Okay, that ends our public comment. Mr. Koretz, any comments? Ms. Martinez? Okay. Well, I'd like to start by saying that we're all sympathetic to the challenges and struggles that traditional workers face reentering the workforce. Organizations like Homeboy, Gracelis, Conservation Corps really are providing invaluable services to our community, giving people a chance to reenter the workforce and restart their lives. I am sensitive to this work. I authored a resolution in support of Prop 47, and I proposed a fair chance initiative that would remove barriers of employment for people reentering the workforce after being previously incarcerated. And I'm personally impacted every day by an organization in my district, the Coalition for Responsible Community Development, who provides similar services for local youth in the 9th District. They are a critical partner for our office and have single-handedly helped turn around the lives of thousands of local residents, giving them a chance when no one else would. I want the representatives of all the transitional organizations to know how much I value what you do. That's why in the Economic Development Committee, I included a recommendation that these organizations be able to apply for a waiver to receive a modified minimum wage schedule, reaching $15 by the year 2021. That's over 6 years from now, giving groups a time to adjust. Creating an exemption rather than a modified schedule will mean that employees of these organizations will forever receive lower wages than workers in every other sector of the city. Philosophically, I've not been comfortable saying to transitional workers that because they faced challenges in their lives in the past, they deserve to be paid less than every other worker in the city. All of you here today, and those that are not with us, have paid your dues to society. I know that many of you are working parents who need this increase in wages to provide for your families. With that said, I have honestly been moved by the outpouring of support that workers themselves have given this proposal. I have thought about this long and hard, and if you feel so strongly that the services you are being given outweigh the potential gains of a higher wage, then I want to do whatever I can to support you. And I want to ensure that we don't limit the power these organizations have to impact more lives. So at this time, I can support the drafting of an ordinance, but I'd request the city attorney in drafting this amending language to include in their report back to this committee some strict, tightly defined language when it comes to the definition of transitional employee and those who would be considered hardest to employ. I want to make sure that we're leaving no room for error here and that we're preventing employers from abusing this exemption. Because at the end of the day, we cannot allow this historic policy to be watered down, and we need to make sure that the maximum number of local workers are benefiting from this policy. With that said, Mr. Cedillo,
yes,
you have the floor.
Yes, I think the case has been well stated by those who benefit from these programs, that what we are doing is recognizing that these young men and women deserve a second chance, that this is a program of redemption, and that these young men and women aspire to be part of that working class that we have all come together to lift their boats. But they're not there yet. And because they're not there yet, we, as you have suggested, have found the scales to tip in the favor of the services that they receive, and that we don't want to leave one person out of the boat. And if that means that during the 18-month period that they can be trained in the things that we take for granted, showing up at work, being there Monday through Friday, recognizing their responsibilities, anger management, sobriety, those things that we take for granted in the workforce are new to them, and they are meeting those challenges. We should support that. And so I applaud your leadership on this matter. and I thank all my colleagues who have joined me in this action. Let me clarify the action for the city attorney. We request the city attorney to draft an ordinance that would allow for employers of job training programs an exemption from the minimum wage during the first 18 months of training for each worker going through the training program. Further, to have the Bureau of Contract Administration, BCA, certify that the employers meet specific criteria before being granted the exemption as outlined in LAAC, Section 10.31.3C, with additional criteria to require a 501c3 status. I have submitted a letter for the record that outlines the basic and needed findings for such exemption. They have been better stated by the participants of the program themselves, and I move that we move this matter forward.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, we will move the approve the motion as presented with a request to the city attorney to pay attention to those drafting issues that have been raised regarding the qualifications of organizations that will qualify for this exemption. Is there any other discussion? Okay, well, that will be the order. Mr. Clerk, is there any other business before us at this time?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, on item number 2, the committee is approving the motion as amended by yourself, the chair, and by Councilmember Cedillo?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we also do have item number 3 before us.
Okay. And I see we've got 3 cards. Let's take these cards first. John Howard, Wayne Spindler, and John Walsh. Item 3. Mr. Clerk, would you care to read that?
Item number 3 is a city attorney report and ordinances clarifying that the city-wide hotel minimum wage ordinance and the living wage ordinance prevail over the city-wide minimum wage law.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Once again, committee, John Howland, Central City Association. When the council passed the citywide hotel living wage last year, it included an amendment by Councilmember O'Farrell. There was a study from the CLA that was supposed to come back that looked at the higher costs associated with creating a hotel using adaptive reuse ordinance and seeing if that should engender any amendments to the wage or other carve-outs for that type of construction because of the higher costs inherent with that program. I believe that was supposed to come back in 6 months. That time has passed. I'm asking, CCA is requesting that that study be heard as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here we go again. Naughty, 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 naughty at all. I guess if I was reading this correctly, if a living wage ordinance is less than the citywide minimum, or the citywide hotel minimum is less than the citywide minimum, you're going to pay them less, depending which one is less. Obviously, it wouldn't be more, so it'd have to be less. So here again, the poor people washing the fucking dishes and scrubbing the toilets and fluffing out the beds and working their butts off are going to get less than this $15 magic minimum wage you're so proud of. Because these employers are major campaign donors. Screw them. $15 an hour, nothing less.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Any discussion, members? Without objection, then we will approve item 3. Okay, we've got two cards, general comments. Wayne the Tomcat and John Walsh. General comment.
Yes, so another successful meeting where you take something and you tell everybody it's going to happen at $15 an hour, and then the lobbyists, the campaign donors, the attorneys and their agents and their lobbyists start cutting into it like a turkey. Exemptions, 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 exemptions. See, that's not honest current price. You're one of the few honest ones here on this 15-man panel, because at least you're very transparent. This is not transparent. Everybody gets the $15 minimum wage or withdraw the proposal. That way, every employer knows exactly where they stand. They don't have to read a 100-page book to find out if somebody can get away with paying less. Make it unilateral against all occupations.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Seeing none, any other items before us at this time?
No, sir, that clears the desk.
Desk is clear. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, members and public.